There are stories in Greek mythology about power, about war, about gods who punish and heroes who conquer and monsters who terrorize the ancient world. There are stories about pride and revenge and the terrible consequences of defying forces greater than yourself. And then there is the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. This is not a story about power. It is not a story about war or conquest or divine punishment. It is a story about love so complete, so absolute, so devastating in its loss that a man walked into the kingdom of the dead to get it back. And it is a story about the single most heartbreaking moment in all of mythology. A moment that lasts only a second, that cannot be taken back, that echoes through thousands of years of human storytelling because everyone who hears it understands, on some level, exactly why it happened. Orpheus was the greatest musician who had ever lived. The son of Apollo himself and the muse Calliope, he had inherited his father's divine gift for music and taken it somewhere even Apollo had never quite reached. When Orpheus played his lyre, the world stopped. Rivers changed course to move closer to the sound. Trees pulled their roots from the earth and walked toward him. Wild animals lay down beside each other, predator and prey, forgetting their natures, simply listening. Rocks wept. The wind went still. Even the gods on Olympus paused what they were doing when the sound of his music drifted up from the earth below. He was not a warrior. He was not a conqueror. He was a musician, and in the ancient world, music was understood as something close to divine magic. The ability to move hearts, to change the world through sound alone, to reach something in every living creature that existed beneath language and reason and thought. And then he met Eurydice. She was a nymph, one of the divine spirits of the natural world, beautiful and free, connected to the living earth in ways that mortals could only dream of. Orpheus fell in love with her completely and immediately, the way that only happens once in a lifetime. She fell in love with him in return. They married, and for a brief time, the world was exactly as it should be. He played music and she listened, and the happiness between them was the kind that makes everything else in the world feel secondary. On the day of their wedding, or shortly after, the ancient sources differ on the exact moment, as if even time itself was reluctant to record it precisely. Eurydice was walking through a meadow. A shepherd named Aristaeus saw her and pursued her. Running to escape him, she stepped on a serpent hidden in the grass. The snake bit her. She died almost immediately, her life ending in the same meadow where it should have been just beginning. Orpheus was destroyed. He did not eat. He did not sleep. He played his lyre in the darkness, and the music that came out of it was unlike anything anyone had ever heard. Not the music of beauty and joy that had stopped rivers and moved mountains, but the music of grief so pure and so complete that everything around him wept. The birds stopped singing. The trees bent toward him. The rivers slowed. The whole natural world recognized what he was carrying and mourned with him. And then Orpheus made a decision that no mortal had ever successfully made before. He decided to go and get her back. He descended into the underworld, the kingdom of Hades and Persephone, the realm of the dead that no living person was supposed to enter and return from. He walked past Cerberus, the three-headed guardian of the gate, playing his lyre as he went. Cerberus, who had never in all of eternity allowed a living soul to pass, lay down and let him through. The music was that powerful. Even death's own guardian could not resist it. He crossed the river Styx on Charon's boat, the ancient ferrymen rowing in silence as the music filled the dark water around them. He walked through the asphodel meadows where ordinary souls drifted without memory or purpose, and they stopped their aimless wandering and turned toward the sound. He passed through the fields of Elysium where the greatest heroes rested in eternal peace, and even they fell silent to listen. He walked through Tartarus itself, the deepest pit of punishment in all of existence, and the screaming stopped. Sisyphus sat down beside his boulder. Tantalus forgot the water and the fruit that always escaped him. Ixion's wheel of fire slowed to a stop. The entire underworld went quiet for the first time in its eternal existence. And then he stood before Hades and Persephone themselves, the king and queen of the dead, the two most powerful figures in the underworld, who had never in all of eternity granted a soul's return to the living world. Orpheus played. He played for his wife. He played for the love that had been taken from him on the day it should have been beginning. He played the grief of someone who had found the one thing in the world that made everything else make sense, and then lost it before he had barely had the chance to hold it. He played with everything he had, everything he was, every note his divine gift could reach. The souls of the dead wept for the first time. The Furies, the divine spirits of vengeance who had never in all of existence shown mercy to anyone, wept tears down their iron cheeks. And Persephone, who understood better than anyone what it meant to be separated from the world above, turned to her husband with tears on her face. Hades agreed. Eurydice would be allowed to return to the living world. She would follow Orpheus back through the underworld and out into the light. There was one condition, a single rule, absolute and non-negotiable. Orpheus must walk ahead of her. He must not look back. Not once. Not until they had both fully crossed back into the world of the living. If he looked back, even for a moment, she would be taken back to the underworld, forever. Orpheus agreed. He began to walk. The journey back was long and dark and silent. The underworld offered no light, no sound, no confirmation that Eurydice was still behind him. He could not hear her footsteps. The dead make no sound. He could not feel her presence. The living and the dead exist in different registers of reality. He walked in complete darkness and complete silence, with nothing but the rule and his trust in it. The darkness seemed to go on forever. Every step felt heavier than the last. The silence pressed against him from all sides. Not the comfortable silence of a peaceful night, but the absolute silence of a world where sound itself did not fully exist. He thought about her face. He thought about the meadow. He thought about the wedding day that had turned into a funeral before it had barely begun. He thought about all the mornings they would have had, all the music he would have played for her, all the years that had been stolen from them by a single moment of terrible bad luck. And then, just as the light of the living world began to appear at the end of the tunnel ahead of him, just as he was almost there, almost through, almost home, he turned around. No one knows exactly why. Perhaps he needed to confirm she was really there. Perhaps the silence had become unbearable and he needed to see her face. Perhaps some part of him simply could not believe that it had worked, that something this good could really be happening after everything he had endured. Perhaps it was love itself that undid him, the same love that had carried him all the way to the kingdom of the dead and back. In that final moment, unable to wait 1 second longer to see her, Eurydice's eyes met his for one moment, just one. And then she was gone, pulled back into the darkness, her hand reaching toward him, her voice whispering his name as the underworld reclaimed her. Not in anger, not as punishment, simply as the consequence of the one rule that had been given and broken. Orpheus tried to follow her back. He returned to the entrance of the underworld and begged Charon to take him across again. He played his music with everything he had left, but this time the ferryman did not move. The agreement had been broken. There would be no second chance. The rules of the dead were absolute. Eurydice was gone. He wandered for years after that, alone, moving through the landscape of ancient Greece like a ghost of the person he had been. He played music that had become something entirely different, not beautiful in any comfortable sense, but profound beyond measure, carrying within every note an understanding of love and loss that no one who had not experienced it could fully comprehend. He refused all company. He spoke to no one. He played his music to the mountains and the rivers and the wild creatures of the world, and they listened, and the world grieved with him in silence. He eventually died at the hands of the Mænadin, the wild, frenzied followers of Dionysus, the god of wine and madness. They were offended by his complete withdrawal from the world and his rejection of all women after Eurydice. His body torn apart in a moment of violence that felt like the final cruelty in a life that had already been given more than its share. His lyre floated downstream after him, still making music even after his hands could no longer hold it. It was eventually placed among the stars, the constellation Lyra, visible on clear nights to anyone who knows where to look. The instrument of the man who walked into death for love and almost made it back. Almost. That word contains everything. The entire tragedy of Orpheus and Eurydice lives in that single word. He did everything right. He found a love worth dying for. He walked into the kingdom of the dead with nothing but music and came back with a miracle. And at the very last moment, in the doorway between darkness and light, he looked back. And love, in that moment, was not enough to save her, but it was enough to make him try. And that, perhaps, is the most human thing in all of mythology.